So before we start the video, I want to let you guys know that I do coaching. Coaching is going to be $50 a piece. It's going to last from 1 to 2 hours. All the coaching information is going to be in the description below. And I also have a Patreon if you want to support me further or just have access to all the coaching sessions. Subscribe for only $3.50 a month. Thank you guys. Enjoy the video. What's up, guys? We are going to be doing a tier list of all of Katarina's best items, and at the end of the video I'm also going to show you guys the builds that you should go, what I think are the best builds, and what I recommend to you guys. And you're going to get an understanding of why the builds are the way they are through this tier list. So I'm essentially just showing you guys what the best items are and the best builds, but in a tier list format so you guys can better understand it. First, let's go with Mejai's. Now, Mejai's is very interesting. Mejai's is considered a full item. It could be good for getting another mythic passive stack, which is pretty nice for Mejai's. Obviously, when you stack Mejai's to 25, it's really nice. It gives you a lot of damage. And it also gives you movement speed, which is both things that Katarina can really benefit off of. But it's not consistent. At any point of the game, you could lose all your stacks, and it just sucks. Now, I value consistency a lot. And so Mejai's isn't really that item for me. A lot of times I don't feel like I'm building it in my builds often. I only really build it when I feel like the game is going in a trajectory where I can just continue to snowball, and Mejai's will just help me do that. And that's not going to be the majority of your games. You can use it to snowball yourself harder, but the value of Mejai's can always drop. The beauty of Mejai's though is that when you pair it up with Rocketbelt, you get an extra 5 pen, which is pretty nice, and that will actually help you deal more damage. Other than that, not a lot of good, consistent situations for it. So I'd probably put it in probably B tier. It's gonna be B tier. Next, we're gonna go Sunfire. Now, Sunfire is a very interesting item, and it is like the tank item of choice that a lot of us go when we go tank cat. Recently it got changed, it only gives armor now, but before when it gave like armor and MR, it was really nice. Now it only gives armor, but it's not a mythic, which is good and bad. So the upside is that it's not a mythic, so you can still build a mythic and still get the armor from Sunfire. The downside is that it doesn't give MR anymore, so it doesn't allow you to build it flexibly into certain teams where they have both AP and AD damage. But it is nice out of all the armor tank items that this one does give a pretty decent amount of damage with the Immolate, with the passive. But even then, it doesn't deal that much damage. But it does make you tanky, so if you need to not die and still deal damage, Sunfire is the buy. There's just not a lot of good builds with Sunfire, but it is the armor tank item to go because it does give Katarina damage, and that's something that tank Katarina does lack. So because of its synergy, it's good, but I would say C tier. I wouldn't really say it's that good or that effective. Doesn't really do much on its own. Just makes you tanky against AD. Not too much of a high impact item. Next is going to be Jak'sho. Now, Jak'sho is sort of the replacement now for Sunfire, where you're able to get armor and MR. So if there's ever like a tank cat build, Jak'sho is like a pretty good choice. Its consistency is good because it actually allows you to get both armor and MR, so you're allowed to build it in a lot of your games just due to the fact that the enemy have both AP and AD damage. And so it's like not bad, but at the same time it suffers the same way Sunfire does, where it's like it's a tank item. Katarina can't really benefit too much off of tank items. Even if she builds tank items, she's still very squishy, and she needs to make up for it by doing damage. But then if she's not doing damage and she's killable, it's like kind of awkward, right? And you can't really get to use the passive very consistently as well. Passive's pretty hard to use. So I would probably put it over Sunfire just due to its versatility. But I'd say overall it's just a C tier item. Next, we got Shadowflame. Okay, I might be a little biased with Shadowflame. I really like Shadowflame. Pen is always really good. The extra pen against shields is a plus. The build path isn't so bad. It's like a good replacement for Deathcap, and it's a great third item after you have your damage set and you want to just do more damage and you get the extra pen off Shadowflame. To me, I like it a lot. It's like a very good third item to build, and I highly value flat pen, and Shadowflame is the item for it. And it can really put your build together, and especially when you're snowballing, you can start really just one-shotting. So I will put that in the A tier, probably top of A tier. I wouldn't build it every time because there will be other items that are more valuable. It's not like a must buy. I think must buys go in the S tier. In the A tier, it's like, I will consider it most of the times just because it's a very good item to build overall. Next, we have Guinsoo's. I know we have a lot of weird picks here, but I thought that I might as well throw in some items that people have seen in the past and want some thoughts on it. So Guinsoo's is on this list. It can actually be really good. A lot of builds that are really good with Cat are ones that like have its own way to scale. And so Guinsoo's can actually help you scale with the amount of on hits that you have. Every third attack, applying double on hit, where Katarina builds a bunch of on hit items, it can actually multiply your damage. The problem is it's pretty ulti reliant. And so if you can't get a good ulti off, it's like not as effective. You would need like a very specific build too. You would need like a bunch of on hit items like Nashor's Tooth, Wit's End, Kraken. Doesn't even work on Kraken. Titanic Hydra, just those kind of items, right? Even Luden's, I guess. It needs too much. It's not a self-sufficient item. And even when you buy it, it's like not like crazy. With Katarina, you really want to just nuke people down and make sure they don't get to play the game. Guinsoo doesn't really do that. So I'm going to put Guinsoo's in a solid bottom of C tier. Next, we have Zhonya's. Now, Zhonya's is super omega amazing item. We all know Katarina needs Zhonya's after a certain point against certain team comps. And that's why it's such a good item. The stasis itself, when you go in, you're able to bait enemies. You're able to stay invincible for a little bit and then just like use that time to stall so your team can do more damage and potentially that can get you more resets. But also you can go in, pressure, do damage, Zhonya's, jump out. It's very versatile, and the 2-second stasis is like so good on Katarina because it allows you to be aggressive and allows you to be defensive as well. It just gives you a lot of versatility in your actions. But the problem is it doesn't give you that much damage. It's very low damage. So essentially you're just buying the item for the stasis. Now this item doesn't really help you win more. This item helps you to survive. It's more of a survivability item than like a snowballing item. Now it could be good for snowballing in very specific cases where the enemy has a lot of AD damage or if they have a lot of things that get completely cucked by Zhonya's. And so that'll just prevent you from dying and you can continue to play really aggressive. But it's not really something that you would want to go for unless you have to. I gotta say though, sometimes when it gets into the teamfight phase, you getting the Zhonya's is like a huge upgrade. So it's actually a very good item. It just doesn't deal a lot of damage, which Katarina wants to do. So for that reason, I'd probably put it up in the A tier, maybe like over here. But I think it's better than Shadowflame. Yeah, I think it's better than Shadowflame just because there's going to be a lot more situations where you're going to build Zhonya's than Shadowflame. Shadowflame's just really good for like pushing your lead, whereas Zhonya's is just going to be something you need to build within the game at some point, even if it's like 5th, 6th item. Next, we have Deathcap, the holy grail of AP items. It gives you a bunch of AP and it also gives you a percentage of the AP that you have. Amazing item. The problem is, it's too expensive and the build path is crazy. It's 2 needlessly large rods. You need to go back with like 3,600 gold in total just to buy this item. And if you just want the components, it's going to be 1,250 per back, which is a lot of gold. So sometimes building this item is a struggle. You can't just choose to build this item. This item will definitely increase your damage by a lot, but it's not something you can choose to build because depending on how your game's going, you might not be able to build it. You're going to have to determine whether this game is a Deathcap game by seeing how much gold you have when you back. So it's not versatile when it comes to actually buying the item. It's not like comfortable to build. But when you do build it, you actually get so much damage, which is what Katarina loves. Tricky item, I gotta say. The one thing with Deathcap though is you do end up always building it later. It's like a really good last item, and a lot of the times our goal to complete the build is to build the Deathcap. Without it, we actually don't do as much damage as we could. So we almost need Deathcap last item. So in that case, I would definitely put it here. I still think Shadowflame is better because it's easier to build and there's going to be a lot more times to build it. Deathcap, the opportunity will come up for you to buy it and then you build it. You can't just like choose to build it. Whereas Shadowflame, you can actually just build it, third item, and be like, okay, I think I'm doing well this game. I'm going to build Shadowflame. Whereas Deathcap's like, I want to build Deathcap, but can I build Deathcap? I'm not too sure. Just based off of that fact, I will put Deathcap in the lower A tier. Next, we have Abyssal Mask. Now, this is another one of these like different items, but I actually do think the item's good. Now, the reason why is because it reduces people's MR, which allows you to do more damage to them multiplicatively, and that's very good. But the problem with Abyssal Mask is that it's not a very reliable item in a lot of your games because sometimes they'll only have like 1 AP champ. I think the value goes up when the enemies have more AP champions on their team, and the value goes down if they don't. So if you build it and they have 4 AD champs, Abyssal Mask is only really just taking down the magic resist from the enemies, which can help you still deal damage, but at the same time, it loses value. And because you can't build it very often, and there's not going to be a lot of situations where you can build this item, I would probably put this around Sunfire, probably over Guinsoo's, because I think it's easier to splash Abyssal Mask into your build than Rageblade. I would say Sunfire and Abyssal have like the same use case, just Sunfire is the AD version and the Abyssal Mask is the MR version. So they're pretty much around the same in this C tier. Next we have Titanic Hydra. Now, we love on-hit items, and Titanic is actually a great on-hit item for Katarina to use. I actually really like Titanic. I think it's a good way to like really top off like a build where you have a lot of tanky items, or if you have a lot of health, and it'll actually help you boost your damage in that sense. And it just deals AoE. The cleave is nice. Just any on-hit item is just really good on Cat. Problem is Titanic Hydra doesn't deal enough damage, and there's not a really good reliable way to scale it when you put all the items together. So you can build like Sunfire, you can go Abyssal Mask, but then Titanic itself won't really deal that much damage at the end of the day. Unless you're like really ahead, and unless you're really snowballing, then that's a different case. But we're talking like if everything's neutral and you're trying to like burst people down, Titanic Hydra doesn't really do that for you. And it only really gives you like health, which is not something that you can really use to like sustain in a team fight. You need like resistances. So this is more of like a good complementary item to go if you have like tanky stats already, kind of like Jak'sho. But at the same time, it's an AD on-hit item. AD on-hit items, it's hard to squeeze these kind of items in because Katarina is an AP champion, and a lot of times you need to go AP. So just off of that fact, Titanic's probably going to be around B tier, probably around lower B tier. It's still a good item. I still like the item. It's just not a very reliable item for what it does. Like, it does damage, it gives you tankiness, but it kind of gives you a little bit of both, not like completely. Next, we have Divine Sunderer. Dude, this item's sick. I actually love this item. Divine Sunderer is a great item just throughout the entire game. Just having the passive Spellblade heal you every like 2 seconds is actually so good for like skirmishing team fights, and Katarina can use this so well because of how much she uses her E. So she can proc her Spellblade like constantly. So she can really use this item very well. And it's one of her best rush items because once you get Divine finished in the laning phase, you can fight a majority of people. And it can really help you survive and like push to win skirmishes. And you could potentially just snowball off that. But this is just one of those items where it doesn't like synergize well with other items that you have. Unless you go like a bit tanky variant. So like the health you get from the Spellblade would actually make you harder to kill because you have resistances on top of that. You know, based off the new Korean cat tank build with like Wit's End and Randuin's, it actually has pretty good synergy there, and I think that's like the best way to really utilize it. But mainly it's just used to help you win early game and sort of give you that survivability just all throughout the game. The thing about this item is that it can actually help you really impact the game once you finish it. It can really help you fight and pressure your laner, and it can help you win skirmishes, and that could really set up your entire game. So I think it's a very high value item. It just doesn't have a lot of good synergies with other items. I would probably put this, it's either like top of A tier or bottom of S tier. I would say top of A tier, I guess. Top of A tier. I think there's only really one true item that's an S tier, but we'll go over that later. Divine's really good, but it's not like a must build every game, and that's the problem. Next we have Luden's. Now Luden's is a very interesting item, and it actually gives you a lot of damage and a lot of burst. It gives you pen, which is great, but you waste some stats by building into the item and actually completing it as well. So it gives like what, 500 mana, and you don't really use that stat. So there are better options, but the item itself actually isn't too bad. You can actually make pretty good use of the passive where like, you know, you get the little extra burst of damage AoE. Just because Katarina can use her on hits just to like get more procs off of it. And it also gives flat pen. Did I say flat pen? Could be a good item, but it's just outclassed. It doesn't give you any real utility. It just gives you like pure damage, which Katarina can still use. But even at the end of the day, it's not that much damage. So I'd probably put Luden's like in the back of B tier. I still think Titanic Hydra is better just because on hit is just so much more versatile to use on Cat. And you'll find more times to use the on hits on Titanic than Luden's. Next we have Kraken. Makes me sad just thinking about Kraken. Item used to be so good on Cat, like actually just straight broken, just because there was no damage reduction on its true damage whenever Cat would ult. Now they like modified it to where Cat only does like what, 30% of the true damage now with their ult. And so the item has really fallen. But this is an item that we really want to see work. And honestly, true damage is always a good idea when it comes to Cat, right? But the item does suck. It just sucks. It doesn't deal enough damage. That's the problem. It used to deal so much. Now it doesn't. But even if you try to complete the build, the scaling on Kraken could be good if you have enough AD, but at the same time, it's just not enough compared to like what other items you can build and other builds that you can go. And we're talking AP. It wants to do what AP does, but it just doesn't. It's just not enough. It's just not enough. Building into AD items is kind of nice though, I gotta say, and having true damage on an AD build, not bad. Could be something you build if you're going an AD build because your team has a lot of AP. So you can go for this option. But Divine Sunderer exists, and so it gets completely outclassed. It's going in the bottom of B tier, maybe even top of C. I'm putting it top of C tier. It's a bait, dude. It's a bait. I'm sorry, guys. I want the item to be good, but it just sucks. Next, we have Wit's End. I like Wit's End a lot. Wit's End, especially on the new Korean Cat build with Divine, Wit's End, Randuin's, you can really see the power of Wits. Now, this is an item that's an MR item, and it has on hit. So it has a lot of value against AP champions. It'll let you survive their damage, but also at the same time, you'll have on hit to do damage to them. So it's great. But the beauty of this item is that it is a standalone scaling on hit item. So you can just have it in your inventory and it'll get stronger and stronger, and Katarina likes to scale that way. So it is a good item, but it is an MR item. So then depending on the game you're in, the value will go up and down. So it's not like completely versatile. You can't just like splash this onto your build, but you almost can. That's why Wit's End is nice. You can be building Wit's End into like 480 champs, but having scaling on hit on the Wit's End will allow you to just deal more damage. And it's AP. And so you can still be the AP carry of your team and build a Wit's End. So honestly, I think it's a good item. Especially when the value of the item goes up when the enemies have a lot of AP, building the Wit's End would actually put you in a pretty good spot. Now, one other downfall of the item is that it doesn't really scale with anything else. So it only gets stronger on its own. And so that's also capped. But I still say the item's good. So I would put it definitely better than Titanic Hydra, I would say. Better than Mejai's. I'd say better than Mejai's. I would say on the top of B tier sounds about right. Next, we talk about Riftmaker. Now, Riftmaker, again, it's another item that I really want it to be good, but it's just not that good. It feels very counterintuitive with what Katarina goes for. Katarina is a champion that wants to go in and burst people down. But then Riftmaker takes 4 seconds to actually proc, so you get full value out of it, which is super awkward because Katarina sometimes can clean up a fight in 4 seconds. I would say the item still works well with Cat. It's just the requirement to actually use it and get the full value out of it is just, it's annoying. And a lot of situations that get thrown at you won't allow you to actually use Riftmaker to its full potential. Now you can use stuff like Demonic Embrace to like Q someone, get the burn, keep the stacks up, and once you're full stacks, you go in. But Katarina has to make split-second decisions to like go in at this perfect time, and she wants to use that window to take advantage of it. And Riftmaker doesn't allow you to take full advantage of those situations. Sometimes you won't be able to even keep it procced with Demonic Embrace. The requirements just suck. And I want the item to be good, but I gotta say, when it's fully stacked, Katarina can really use it super well. Once you get the item fully procced and you go in at the perfect time, the amount of healing you get and the true damage is just, it's really good. And that's why I want the item to be good, but the requirement is too much. It's for champions that can stay in fights and sort of drag out these fights and eventually get the healing and the full value and the true damage. And a lot of times Katarina can't have the luxury to do that. So I'm gonna put it in the bottom. Better than Titanic? I think it's better than Titanic. Is it better than Mejai's though? It's gonna be B tier for sure. I just don't know if it's gonna be above or below Mejai's. Nah, I put it below Mejai's. I'll put it below Mejai's. Mejai's is definitely will help you close out games. I think it's better than Titanic for sure. And Luden's. Because when the item pops off, it's just so good. Maybe I'm a little biased with the Riftmaker, but I think middle of B tier is okay. Actually, now that I think about it, I think Wit's End is better than Riftmaker, but not as good as Mejai's. I think Mejai's is actually better than Wit's. We'll do this. I think this looks good. Next, we'll go into GA. GA, just you're only really getting it to survive in these very late game scenarios where like you need to win this fight in order for you to win the game. If you don't win the fight, then you lose the game sort of deal. So a lot of times GA isn't really that good and it doesn't really give you the right amount of stats for it to be worth it. Zhonya's just does the job better. It synergizes well with Katarina builds that are already there. The cooldown is a lot shorter, so you have more open windows to actually get aggressive or play defensive. GA is just completely outclassed by Zhonya's in my opinion. So I'm going to put it actually in D tier. I wouldn't recommend this item at all. Only when you really need it and if you have the damage without it. Next, we'll go into Demonic Embrace. Can be a good item, and it actually scales with health, so it's actually not too bad. It's an AP item, so it has synergy with all the other AP items that you have, including like Deathcap, Nashors. It's good for working together with Riftmaker, so it's not bad. But it promotes kind of like a bruiser cat, which is kind of awkward for cat because it gives you AP and it gives you health, but it doesn't give you enough of either for it to be like very impactful. I gotta say, it's probably around here. I think there's more use cases than Titanic for sure, because AP is clearly her best build, so Demonic will give you more damage. So I think it's better than Riftmaker though. I think you need Riftmaker in order to build Demonic, so I think it's below Riftmaker. So I think this is about right, in the middle of B tier. Next we have Death Stance. Now Death Stance can be a good armor item, and it also gives you AD, which will amplify the scalings, your AD scalings on your damage, and also has a pretty decent survivability effect. Honestly, armor items have good value because you're always having to deal with some kind of ADC, but I do think it's a low impact item. It doesn't really give you that much damage, it just gives you straight survivability, but it has its good synergies with like Conquer and like Riftmaker where it'll keep you alive long enough for you to heal up and makes you pretty harder to kill, but it's also in very niche situations. Not much to talk about with this item, it just doesn't deal enough damage and you're only building it for survivability. I'd probably put it bottom of B. Nah, but it's top of C. I think it's still good at what it does, but again, it doesn't really help you carry or anything. It's just there for utility at the end of the day. Next we have Rylai's. Another good item that I want to be like actually using, but it just blows. It gives you 90 AP, which is a good amount. It gives you a pretty decent amount of health and it gives you the slow. But because there are so many other good AP items out there, and it like conflicts with the whole idea that like if you have health and AP, it doesn't actually give you a lot of damage and it doesn't actually give you a lot of survivability. It's just awkward. But the slow is nice, the utility is nice, but it's just not enough. I'll probably put it at the top of C tier, maybe like around here. Actually, this is almost like a never buy just because of how outclassed it is. I almost want to put it even lower. But I do think just it being a purely AP item will make it better than a lot of these other items. Nah, this might go into D tier, honestly. It's going in the D tier. Even under Guinsoo's, because I know Guinsoo's can actually potentially carry games. Rylai's just doesn't. And you know what else is going to be in D tier? Night Harvester. I'm immediately putting it... I almost want to... I don't know which one's worse. It's one of them's worse, dude. Now, the thing is, Night Harvester sounds like it'd be such a good idea, and the item just sounds good, but it's a huge bait, because the item itself doesn't do enough damage for Katarina to take advantage of. Once people start getting MR, or just like not even building MR, they just have scaling MR now due to the durability patch, the Night Harvester is pretty useless unless you have like actual pen, but it's not built into the item like other items like Luden's and Protobelt. I don't know, like it's just a big bait. And even though it's an AP item, I just want to say it, because of how big of a bait it is, I just want to put it all the way down there. It's actually less effective than like the tank items, because tank items will actually keep you alive to do more damage. Whereas this item wants to do damage, but it does no damage. And so it just sucks. It gives you ability haste too, which also sucks. Katarina needs flat pen from like her mythics. Now Divine, Luden's, and Protobelt all give pen. And that's what you need to like multiply damage. Whereas Night Harvester, you need to build a whole nother item for it, and it's just not worth it. Top of D tier. I think that's good. Next we have Bork. Now Bork is a great item. Bork is a great first item for like just snowballing the game, and it has a very similar purpose to Divine. You get the AD items to start up. You can start snowballing with like AD Conquer and really just like run people over in the laning phase. And once you build it, oh, you're actually so strong early to mid game. But the scaling sucks. It doesn't scale off anything, and it just falls off so hard. That's the problem. You can use this item to just completely snowball yourself all the way into the mid game and just end the game from there. Bork has the power to do that. But once it gets past that point, and let's say you weren't able to snowball to mid game, it's better to just sell it and buy something else. The problem with the item is that people get passive armor growth after the durability patch. So you almost need armor pen to like continue to do more damage with Bork. When people have like really low armor in the early to mid game, that's when Bork is really good. You can say building Bork is good into like high health champions, but they also get the most armor passively. And once they build an armor item, even a chain vest, you really can't kill them. There's no reliable armor pen item for Bork to be good and used consistently either, but it's really good at what it does in terms of its job. Building the item and just snowballing off of it completely. I would definitely put it under Divine. I think Divine's better, more versatile. Bork also has like a worse item build leading up to it. Having to build a recurve bow kind of sucks and only really helps your ulti. And the pickaxe is kind of annoying to build, whereas Divine, you can go like Sheen, double longsword. Divine just definitely outclasses this first item. Once they're built though, Bork is actually very strong. And it's almost like even with Divine or maybe even better. But with all the reasons put together, I don't think it's like that good, and you're not going to want to build it in a lot of your games. Especially when you're behind, trying to build this item sucks. I think it's going to go on A tier, maybe like here. I think this seems pretty good. Next, we'll go into Void Staff. Now, Void Staff is one of those items that you need in certain situations. It's not something that you want to build every game, but you need to. Because once they build a certain amount of MR, your damage is going to get a lot lower. And so you need Void Staff to mitigate the MR that they have. A lot of times you're going to have to build this because of the durability patch. So Katarina can benefit a lot from having pen, but it's not something you have to build every game. It's almost in the similar situation as like Shadowflame. So I can put it like here. But I think Void Staff won't help you win games. It's more of a reactive buy against the enemies. Whereas Shadowflame, you can use it to actually win the game and just like one-shot people, right? So I think it's below Shadowflame due to its effectiveness and impact. But Void Staff is also an item that you need to build when the time comes. There's like a threshold with this. Like Shadowflame, I think if they have like 50, 60 MR, Shadowflame will do more. And then if anything above that, Void Staff will actually do more. Next, we have Banshee's Veil. Now, Banshee's Veil is an awkward item. It gives you AP, it gives you the shield, but the shield you get from Banshee's Veil isn't really that effective because it's so easy to pop. So she can't really use that very well unless she doesn't want to get picked by like Blitzcrank. But even then, it doesn't really give you that much AP. It doesn't really make you that much more tankier unless you're versing a team that's like filled with AP champs. Then Banshee's goes up in value. But even like Zhonya's, right? Zhonya's is an item that you can sort of just build into any comp and it will be more effective. Banshee's has this like defensive factor to it, but it gets completely outclassed by Zhonya's in that sense. And I think it also gets outclassed by Wit's End. This is like not something you would really build unless you really have to, but there's so little situations to actually build it. So I think it's gonna be around here. Probably C tier. I will never really go Banshee's Veil, honestly. Next we have Protobelt. Now we're getting into the big items. Protobelt, I'm gonna put right up here. Protobelt does a lot for you. It gives you a lot of utility. It gives you 90 AP. It gives you health. It gives you the passive. It gives you Magic Pen, which is what I think is the biggest thing. Just having the passive on it makes it so good, and the active synergizes really well with Cat. Because Katarina's best build is the AP build, you need Protobelt to really round out your build. It gives you more flat pen, which will multiply your damage. It gives you good pick potential with the movement speed that you get and the dash, and you could even use it defensively. And it'll help you scale your Nashor's Tooth, which is what we're going to talk about next. I think this item's great. We can pretty much benefit off of every stat Protobelt has. Everything it has to offer, we could benefit off of. And that's why I think because it's such a well-rounded item, I would put it S tier. But there is an item that's stronger than Protobelt, and it almost needs this item, which is Nashor's Tooth, which I'm going to put right up here. Nashor's Tooth is the best item on Cat. Tell you right now. Your whole build will revolve around this item. Her best build is the AP build, and Nashor's Tooth is the core center of what Riot is pushing her into. An AP on-hit burst champion. Nashor's Tooth does everything. Yes, building it into it kind of sucks when it comes to the recurve bow, but the blasting one and the Am Tome itself is enough for you to do damage and have the utility to push out waves and just freely roam. It gives you enough AP for you to still be effective. Even though you have to build into the recurve bow, once you finish it, this item is just amazing. It buffs up everything that you do. Buffs up your Q, your E, your everything. And it gives you more damage because it does on hit too. So, and like think about it, and going Nashor's first also gives you so much damage. It's just the best item on Cat. Like you can't argue. If you're going Protobelt, Zhonya's, Shadowflame, Void Staff, Deathcap, you need Nashors because that will multiply your damage by so much and you'll be able to one-shot people. Your autos do damage. It does everything. It does literally everything for you. So it's a perfect top of the S tier item on Cat. Nashors doesn't need Protobelt, but Protobelt needs Nashors. That's why Nashors is also above Protobelt. Now after that whole explanation of saying the best item, we're going to have to bring down the energy a little bit, and we're going to talk about Lich Bane. Lich Bane, I like the item. I think the item is good. The potential for Lich Bane is huge. It could just burst people down up front. Katarina can activate it with her E. You could just go in, pop someone, go on to the next person. But the problem is Lich Bane isn't a good standalone item. It has to scale off of other AP items, and when you have Deathcap, that's when Lich Bane does a lot of damage. But even then, it's not consistent damage. You have to wait for the Spellblade to come back up so that you can use your Shumpo again and proc the Lich Bane. It's not really AoE either. It's just, you want to pop this one guy, you just go in with the Lich Bane, you pop him. So it does its job well, but it needs to be backed up by other items. And I think that's why it's going to be a little bit lower on this tier list. So Divine and Lich Bane are both Spellblade items, but then the thing with Divine is that Divine gives you survivability in order for you to get more procs off. Whereas Lich Bane, you need to go in and just one-shot that person and just use that Lich Bane to just burst multiple people down. And you just gotta hope that you do enough damage to do it, right? Whereas Divine, you can use that to stay alive and continue to get more rotations off in team fights and skirmishes. So it almost has this go in one-shot kind of dynamic, and if you don't one-shot them, then the item has almost failed. That's why you want the item to do what it does when you have enough AP to back it up. So it's a very good late game item. This is something I would never build unless I'm way past full build and I need to sell my boots for something that's more efficient. Lich Bane is pretty good for that because it gives movement speed as well, so you don't lose out on too much movement speed. You still get a little bit, but also you have so much AP to back it up. So in that sense, I would actually put it pretty decently low, maybe B tier. I don't think it goes in A tier. I think Mejai's is still better. I'll put it here because I do think that you can still splash it into a build and it'll still be effective. It's not really situational either. It complements her best build, which is the AP build. I think here is good. I think Wit's End is still better just based off of how much it could do on its own, whereas Lich Bane is so reliant on other items. So I think this is a pretty good place to put it. I'd still put it over Riftmaker just because I think it fits Katarina's playstyle better, where you just want to burst people down. So even if you build it third, fourth item after Shadowflame, Nashor's Tooth, Protobelt, I still think it could be a pretty effective item. So this is pretty much a tier list. I think I can maybe adjust things here and there depending, but I think this is a pretty good idea. It's really weird because, you have stuff like Guinsoo's and you have stuff like Jak'sho, Sunfire, Kraken over Night Harvester, Rylai's. I think these are a little bit more personal bias. I wanted to really throw them down there because, I hate these items. I want them to be good, but they're not. So they belong in D tier. But I would say when it comes to overall tank items, it's like could be a lot more effective than these two items. I think they're so outclassed by other items that they're almost a never build. Even like Banshee's Veil, right? But then when it comes to like these tank items, I think it's okay to like leave them around the bottom middle, and they work pretty well together. Notice how a lot of the on-hit items are also like kind of more up there in the tier list because on-hit is just so good. And Katarina can always find some way to use on-hits and form a build around them. It kind of goes down the line of like full AP burst down to like kind of like the on-hit area, and then sort of like in the tank area, and then these two items that belong in the trash. Oh, I forgot about GA. GA also belongs in the trash, but GA is okay. He's chill. GA's chill. Yeah, let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree. Because this is complete like my own personal opinions. So there's going to be a lot of different opinions out there, and I want to hear yours. So let me know down in the comments. So now let's talk about the builds. Now when it comes to the direction of where the champion went, Riot really pushed her in a very specific direction. AP burst with on hit. And that's clearly going to be the best build. So if you want to build one build that you can actually do in all of your games, no matter the runes, it's going to be this one. Nashor's, Rocketbelt, Shadowflame, Zhonya's, Deathcap, and Void Staff. Now, like I said before, you're going to have to build boots in this, right? But like I said before, Void Staff and Shadowflame can be interchanged. So going like this, where it's like Nashor's, Rocketbelt, Zhonya's, Deathcap, Void Staff, or even just like switch Void Staff, put Deathcap later, right? So a build like this could actually be very good. Now, let's say you're just completely snowballing the game. Then you can like replace the Void with like the Shadowflame and just kind of do this, right? You go Nashor's, Rocketbelt, Shadowflame, and from there you try to end the game. But then if they're like hard to deal with and you still have like a bit of the game to go and you can't really end, but you need to win these team fights, then you go into the Zhonya's, and then you go into the Deathcap to like top off your build. But you can also like switch, and if you're really snowballing that hard, just go into the Deathcap and just go Nashor's, Rocketbelt, Shadowflame, Deathcap, and you just start one-shotting everything. And then you go into the Zhonya's later for you to like make sure you win these fights. But yeah, like I said, Shadowflame and Void Staff could be pretty interchangeable. But remember that a lot of these builds are gonna be depending on like how your game's going. Like you can't just like tunnel into this build where it's like, okay, this build's gonna be the best build right here. This build's gonna give me the most damage, so I'm just gonna build this item. But then, like I said with Deathcap, like Deathcap is hard to build, so it's a good example for this. You don't have the luxury to build Deathcap if you're like not doing too hot in your game, right? Then what? Okay, I'm gonna take like 10 minutes to try to build this Deathcap, but at that time, people are building MR. Then crap, I need Void Staff. But then now I'm stuck with this item here, and because they have MR, I still can't one-shot them. So builds are gonna be varying depending on your game, and you have to be able to adapt and adjust. But luckily for us, there's not that much options with Cat. So just relying on these items, these 6 items, and just knowing which order to go and like how to build them and when is your best bet. As long as you're going Nashor's Rocketbelt in the beginning, you could even change these up, but I'd say most of the time Nashor's is going to be a very strong, reliable buy compared to Rocketbelt first because of the on-hit. It'll actually spike you harder if you go Nash. So I like to go Nash into Rocketbelt and then see what I could build from there. Like if they have a lot of champions that like really own you and you need to survive, you can go Zhonya's third even and just like do this and sort of like interchange these 3 depending on what you need. You're gonna lose out on damage, but you can't do damage if you're dead. And so if you need Zhonya's to actually stay alive in fights, then this is gonna be a valuable buy because you're gonna be able to live to deal damage. If they build like a bunch of MR, you could even go into Void Staff third and it would do a lot of damage if they already are stacking MR against your like 4 AP team, right? So again, all situational, but I do think these 2 are good here. You should build these 2 like this, and you should like change these up depending on your situation. You could even stick Mejai's in there, honestly, but I think this is like more consistent, and sometimes with the Mejai's, a lot of times you're going to be building Dark Seal anyway. You can go into the Mejai's like as you're snowballing and start working on the other items if you have the gold. But again, for me, I don't really build Mejai's too often, only when I really know that it's going to have a lot of value. I would say this is probably the most reliant and most consistent and the best build overall on Cat. Now we'll go into the second build, and it's going to look something like this. It's like you start off with the Bork or the Divine, and then you go into AP after. You're going an AD item in order for you to win the early game so that you can start going into your AP items after, and then pretty much top off the build with like more AP scaling for your Nash. So most of the times you're gonna see this, where it's like Divine, Nash, and then these are interchangeable again. Same concept as the first build. It's gonna be different and situational depending. But going Divine into Nashers is actually a good way for you to secure your early game and make you more effective and more impactful, depending on the matchup, right? So if I was versing like Kassadin or if I was versing Silas, going Divine or Bork could help me win that lane so that I can start building into AP. But then let's say you're going into just straight Nashor's Tooth and you're versing like Silas Kassadin, it's actually very hard to pressure them without AD items until you actually get the Nashor's Tooth. But at that time, like, do you want to let Kassadin scale up to that point till you get Nashor's Tooth? You want to maybe use Divine and Bork with their AD components to try to like really pressure Kassadin and Silas. And those are just the two examples I'm using, but there are other examples like Galio. Like Galio gets owned by Bork. So like sometimes you want to build like an item that will work really well against your laner, and then build into your AP build afterwards. So I would say that's the second best build. I think more so it's going to be Divine over Bork. But depending on what you like, you can also go Bork as well. They both work. It just depends on what matchup you are in and what you're comfortable with using. All right, so now let's talk about other builds. Now we can sort of go into like the other AP builds that there are, sort of like Nashers, Riftmaker, Demonic. We can look into this build and still be pretty effective and pretty good, but I don't think it's as effective as just going full burst and going into like your raw AP items. This Riftmaker is definitely outclassed by Protobelt, just based off of all the reasons that I said prior. And going like Divine is actually a really good way to complement Conquer. Even if you go Conquer and Riftmaker, Divine's a really good way to sort of complement it, and it's a lot easier to use. So Riftmaker also gets outclassed by the Divine build. But honestly, this build isn't bad, so I'd say this one sort of... So you have the first two builds, and then you have the builds that come afterwards. I would say those builds kind of like are lower. Just kind of in their own pool, and I wouldn't really put them in any order. I just want to like talk about them. So again, with the reasons that I talked about before, this build is kind of okay. The beauty of this build is that you can still go into raw AP afterwards, which is really nice. So this build can scale just as well as the regular Protobelt build. It's just that once you build Riftmaker, it's just, you're going to plateau a little bit. And you don't really want that. Whereas like Nashor's, Protobelt, you're like in a constant upwards trend of damage, and you'll only do more damage as you go. Next, we could talk about like Bork and what Bork can really open us up for. So you can actually go into the AD build as well. You can go like Bork, Divine, and then you can go into like Titanic. And so like sometimes you would need to go AD, right? Like if your whole team is AP and you need like an AD champion to really do damage, you can go like Bork, Divine, Titanic. You could even go like Divine, Bork. And you could even go like Divine, Bork, Wits, DD. Like this build is not bad. Titanic doesn't get too much scaling, but on it is on hit and it will do damage as long as you're hitting them. Bork is just a really good, like, this is pretty much your Nashers when it comes to the AD build. Your Bork is going to serve the same purpose as your Nashers, and you're going to be relying on this for damage a lot. So you can go something like this, and you can kind of interchange it, but the problem with this build is that it just doesn't scale. When you see the scaling on AP, the scaling is almost infinite. Whereas like this build, it like falls off and it will plateau because like I said, Bork plateaus. Even if you build like armor pen items, like there's not good ones like Cyrilda's, Lord Dominic's. They could be okay, but at the same time, a lot of your damage is going to be magic damage anyway because your abilities are all magic damage. So then you're essentially just getting the pen just for your ulti, like half your ulti, and these two on-hit items, and the Divine, I guess. But it's an awkward build. You want to build this when you can know you can end it at mid-game, and you just really use the AD items to snowball, because these items are really strong on their own. When you see Divine, Bork, these two are so strong that when you put them together and you're in the early to mid game and you build them early, you can pretty much just kill like majority of enemies. But again, scaling is the issue. If the game goes on too long and you don't know what you're doing, then this build can really backfire. Next, I do want to talk about the Korean tank build, which looks something like this. You can top it off with the Titanic too. So like you go Divine first, and you go into Wit's End, and Wit's End would pretty much be your on-it item, kind of like Nashor's and Bork. And then you go into the Randuins after, because I'm assuming it's because like a lot of the AD champions got buffed due to IE and Navries. And so Randuins is going to be the item to kind of counteract those like AD buffs that they got. I can see this build being pretty good, and I've tested it a bunch of times, and honestly, like it works pretty well together. There's a lot of synergies. Like I said before, when it comes to Divine, you can actually get more value off of the healing just by having resistances. And going Wits and Randuins would actually give you the armor and MR you need to make more use of the healing that you get from Divine. Wit's End, again, is a good standalone on-hit item, so then just having this as your damage item is good. And then you go into the Randomists to just give you even more tankiness, and then you also still do a lot of damage with like Divine and Wits. You can still do a lot of damage with this build just by being able to stay alive and continuing to throw out more rotations and your abilities and your E's and stuff like that. This build does fall off. It scales on its own, but it falls off at the same time. You're essentially using these two items that are very good standalone items to do your damage. But again, like when you really compare to AP, and even when you're like full build on AP and you can't one-shot people, it feels really bad. So then just imagine this build and how it would scale. You want to like really bully the enemies with this build. And if you're able to do that, you can potentially just get them to FF like mid-game. You have to already be pretty strong for this build, but it lets you like fight. It lets you, it pretty much enables you to do a pretty good amount of stuff. I'd say this build's pretty good. I would put this like maybe third on the tier list of the builds, maybe like third or fourth. Like it's more up there than the other builds, I'd say. Now on the topic of that build, you know, with Tank Cat, that's probably the most viable Tank Cat build just because it gives you like a really good amount of everything just based off of like 3 items. So it's like very efficient. You can also go other Tank Cat variants. Like I said, Sunfire, Jak'sho, Abyssal Mask could all be good, but they're all situational just because the value goes up and down depending on the game that you're in. Jak'sho could be a little bit more flexible in these situations, but at the same time, the build still ends up being pretty awkward, and here's why. You can go like Bork, you can go Nash. Again, you need like one on-it item so that you're consistently doing a lot of damage. You could even go like Wit's End if you want. Just get like a good on-hit item just so that you're able to deal damage throughout the game. And then you build like into a tank item afterwards. So it could look like something like this, and these could be interchangeable depending on what you need. Let's say it's Jak'sho. Let's say they have a spread evened out like AD and AP mix. So you can benefit off the tankiness that you get from your tank item, and then you can start going into more damage and just use like this tank item just to get more survivability. So you can go like, you know, you can start scaling your Nashor's Tooth if you want. You can start going into AD items if you want. If you're going Bork, you can do this, and then you can start going into like Titanic, which is a very popular build, I'd say. Like going something like this or this. Just topping off like a tank build with Titanic is pretty nice because Titanic actually scales off of more health. And so you could do builds like that, but again, the problem is that it just doesn't scale well. Even if you like really scale up Titanic Hydra, it just doesn't deal enough damage because there's not enough good pen items in the game for Katarina to utilize. And I'm talking about armor pen. But like I've seen builds where it's kind of like this, and then you're going into like AP afterwards, like Shadowflame, and this would actually help you deal a lot of damage, and it will actually give you a good amount of AP to actually like keep scaling, and you'll still burst people down. But the problem with this build is that it's kind of awkward because you're going to plateau in terms of damage when you start building your tank item. So you can build a tank item later if you want, if you really want to like offset the timing and sort of make sure that you get your damage secure first. But let's say the popular way that people build it is like Nashor's into Jak'sho, or just tank item, just any tank item like after the Nashor's Tooth and then go into the AP after. You're going to plateau in terms of damage when building this tank item. And so like, again, the upwards trajectory where like you're going to be going AP, but then you have this tank item building in the middle. And like during that time, you can't really one-shot the enemy laner. Whereas like, let's say if this was, for example, Protobelt, you're going to be able to use the Protobelt to like continue to pressure and deal more damage. Now, the thing is, if they don't have a lot of like champions that you can really kill, and they have a very specific team comp where like, if you just survive their abilities and their damage, then you would actually get value. And so like, that's why in those situations, tank could be pretty good. I would say this is pretty good to do in like lower elo, just like going into like some tank build, because you're definitely going to scale because games last longer, but also there's so much fighting that like you actually get a lot of value with like your your armor and MR. So I actually get recommended the tank builds like a lot from like lower elo players. They're like what, silver, gold, and I understand why it's good there, but as you go up in the ranks, you're gonna need to really optimize the amount of damage you're putting out and be able to pressure at all stages of the game, because you're only so limited in time. Games end sooner in higher elo, and so you want to make sure every buy is worth it. And again, Katarina's an assassin, so you want to like really just push your damage and really put the pressure on that way. We can also argue that, like, you know, if you go tank, you can actually win out in team fights, because this will actually help you team fight pretty well. Just going into tank items, but it doesn't help you burst and assassinate people down. But if you're in a game where like there's constant just team fights, so like let's say your team is just like coordinated and you guys are constantly jumping from objective to objective and only really fighting that way, then like this build could be actually pretty good, because this build would do pretty well in team fights. Because you're hard to kill, even if they focus you, you might not die. You can take CC. It's like, and it allows you to be more aggressive in like a 5v5. And it'll allow you to take more initiative. You don't have to just jump in and like try to assassinate someone and get the reset. You can go in and almost like bait them to use their stuff and then get the reset after, and then continue to reset. So that's why I always really like the tank build. You already know that I used to build tank like all day. This is pretty much how I climbed to high elo, just like building tank cat, but not with these items. Nowadays, tank cat is a little bit obsolete, just based off of that fact. Like, people get too tanky in order for you to deal damage, and a perfect tank cat build would be a build where like you have damage and you have tankiness, but right now the problem is actually keeping the damage. And the only way you're gonna build damage in this scenario here is if you get like 2 more AP items after the Jak'sho, whatever the AP item is, right? Then you'll start actually doing damage, and you can sort of benefit off of the extra resistances that you have. But after a certain point, you might not even be able to tank, right? Because they're going to have all their damage. So it's just really awkward. But I always want these tank builds to work, but you know, that's just my philosophy on them. I would say these have their own place in games. You can really find team comps where you could really abuse this build, and it can be like very oppressive, especially when you're ahead and you can still one-shot people. You just build the Jak'sho, and then like they're trying to kill you and trying to burst you down, but you don't die. It's great. It's great. Again, it's like right now is not the time to be going tank cat, sadly. But yeah, that was pretty much the guide, guys. That was pretty much the whole build, the tier list, everything. I pretty much poured my thoughts and try to give you as much information as I can. And I know you guys will learn a lot from this, and sort of my mentality on when it comes to like building items. I'm really hoping that Katarina does get AD buffs so that she can sort of be more versatile in her builds. And who knows, maybe new items that come out, sort of like a Heartsteel, but better, could push her into other builds. I think people are still experimenting, but really the beauty with Kat is that you can be really versatile with their builds, just because of the on-hit. So she can use like a lot of builds that, you know, can utilize certain on-hit items, kind of like Titanic, Bork, stuff like that, like Wit's End. And so this is a great time. This is a great time. The problem is AP is just so much better than the other builds that AP is always just going to be on top, which sucks, but you know, it's the time that we live in. But yeah, that was the video, guys. If you guys enjoyed the video, let me know down in the comments. Just give me some thoughts. I gave a lot of information, so I hope you guys learned a lot. I'll see you guys next time.